All right, Friday night is for our interaction with our locals members, but also in front of our entire Rumble audience. And the reason we do that, as I've said before, is I think interaction with your audience is of the most importance. I have always hated the model of journalism that's monologue informed, where some journalist just sits on a mountaintop and bequeaths to people the truth. I think it's very important to hear critiques and questions and interact. We do that throughout the week on locals, but Friday night is the time when we take questions from our locals members. So let's get into them. We have a lot of good ones tonight. I want to try and get to as many as possible. The first one is from Christina K, who says, quote, "I would love to hear your thoughts on the cancellation of the international student visa program at Harvard University. Thank you." All right, now I talked a little bit with Lee about this, and he said something I completely agree with, which is I never thought I would be defending Harvard in my life, especially over the last, say 10 years. Harvard really has become a place which is almost ground zero for censoring speech that it dislikes. It's often ideologically homogenous. It's become just this kind of closed circle of very kind of specific, idiosyncratic, academic-ish, left-wing, culture war, homogeny. And there's a lot wrong with academia in general. All that said, I find academia to be extremely important. I think it's a vital part of society. And if you go back to the Enlightenment, which I regard as the founding principles of Western civilization, at least in the modern era, in terms of our political values and the like, every one of those Enlightenment thinkers, or the leading ones, were academics often. They talked frequently about the need to have at least one place in society where everything is up for grabs in terms of what you can debate, what you can challenge. There are no taboos. There are no pieties. And I think having institutions in society like that, where everything is studied, everything is questioned, everything is poked at, is vital. And I like going to college. I like going to law school, and that was a big part of my experience. I was able to do that all the time, and I found it so refreshing. It helped me learn a lot. It really stimulated my interest intellectually, that there were all sorts of things out there that had been about, questioning these long-term pieties, and you were free to express the things that you wanted to express. And I think it is quite disappointing, quite harmful, quite tragic, that in so many ways our universities have become these ideologically homogenized outposts of political activism at the expense of what should be this academic freedom. Nonetheless, it really is true that one of the things that has been most responsible for America's success, economically, technologically, politically, socially, militarily, has been research that takes place at our highest institutions. I mean, everywhere in the world, people look at Harvard and talk about Harvard with great admiration and awe. Here in Brazil, if somebody went to go and study at Harvard, even for a year, and they come back and they say, "Oh, I studied at Harvard," it imparts them with immense credibility. And that's how it's looked at around the world. I mean, Harvard is one of the symbols of American greatness. It's been a college, a leading college for, 500 years now, 450 years. And same of Yale and Brown and Princeton, but Harvard, especially globally, is at the top. And so I think if you're going to have a government that suddenly decides that it's going to wage a major war to try and destroy what have always been America's leading academic institutions, just kind of out of the blue, just start attacking it in every conceivable way, I think everybody should be very guarded about why that's happening. In general, academic institutions, the leading ones, and the government have had extremely close partnerships. The reason the federal government gives money to places like Harvard and Yale and all sorts of other schools is not because the government is being benevolent. It's not because the government wants it to have a nice gender studies program. Sometimes it's to fortify financial aid so that not only rich people from rich families can go to the top schools, but mostly it's for paying for research projects that the United States government once undertaken. It was federal funded research programs at our universities that led to the invention of the internet in the United States and American dominance over the internet for all those years. It came right out of federal funding of academic institutions. Cures and medical treatments, scientific advances, technological advances that often were things the government wanted done for military use. And when you have well-funded research programs, that's how you attract the greatest minds from all around the world. And that only fortifies the institution. Without these research facilities, it basically just becomes like a liberal arts school for, 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, as opposed to institutions where the highest level research and innovations take place. And on top of that, it's the question of why are these institutions being attacked? And in the case of Harvard and Columbia and Yale and Brown and Princeton and all the others the Trump administration has targeted, there's been one argument that I think is a valid one, which is that there has been this discrimination in the admissions process. For a long time, it was considered affirmative action, where you would purposely go out of your way to divide all the applicants into groups of race to ensure that there was a representative percentage from each group. And part of that was to correct historical injustices. Other parts of it was to have a more diverse campus. And I think there was a time when you could make that argument that was necessary. And over time, we've gotten to the point where we've decided that that's no longer necessary, that it's actually a form of racism in its own way. And courts have stepped in and begun to rule against those sorts of practices, and they've had to scale back greatly on them. So I understand that objection. But the much bigger reason, as we know, is that these schools allowed protests against Israel to take place. And for many years, you can go back to 2010, 2012, 2014, all of these groups that are funded by Israel or Israeli loyal billionaires were obsessed with American college campuses because they knew that that's where the primary activism against Israel was, based on this boycott, divestment, and sanctions model that helped bring down the apartheid regime in South Africa. Israel and its loyalists were petrified that that would work in American campuses, and they knew a lot of the anti-Israel sentiment was being talked about and allowed on American campuses, and they set out this whole anti-woke thing. If you go and look at it, all these people who were obsessed with Israel, who led this anti-woke movement on college campuses, were doing it in part because they hated American colleges because it allowed too much Israel criticism. And the Trump administration is saying that you have allowed too much anti-Semitism, meaning Israel criticism, on your campus. They're actually forcing institutions to put their Middle East studies program under receivership so the government can control what is taught in Middle East studies programs. Who thought that the role of the U.S. government was to control the curricula of how adult academics who teach adult students can do their curriculum, can pick their course materials? But that's what the Trump administration is doing, and it's all because of Israel. To some extent, it's because they perceive it's kind of a left-wing institution. They want to attack it, but they've already denied funding to these schools. Here from AP, on April 15th, Trump administration freezes $2.2 billion in grants to Harvard due to campus activism. And we know what that means. Campus activism means the Israel protests that you allowed. And then when Harvard, unlike Columbia and other universities that accepted all these extreme draconian controls by the government, yes, you can control our curriculum, you can supervise our hiring and our admissions process. And Harvard said, look, you've gone too far. We've made a lot of concessions, but we're about to become a branch of the Trump administration if we go too far, and we're going to sue instead. And they sued. That's when the government went ballistic. And today, Homeland Security announced that they were canceling the student visas of all Harvard students, revoking them immediately, and would refuse to give student visas for any international students that want to go to Harvard in the future. So only 25% of Harvard has international students. It's a way that, the United States spreads pro-American sentiment. People want to come to the United States. They want to study in the United States. They get integrated into American culture. It has great benefits for the United States. As I said, that people look at Harvard as this place that everyone around the world wants to go to, or Yale, or Princeton. or Columbia, Stanford, whatever. And we're waging war on one of our most valuable and credible institutions, despite all the flaws that I know it has. And we're doing it not because we think that the schools aren't doing their job. We're doing it because they allow too much criticism of Israel. And the idea that Harvard, of all places, its current president is Jewish, most of its past presidents are close to a majority, if not an overwhelming majority over the last 30 years have been Jewish. Larry Summers is one of the people who ran Harvard for the longest. Their biggest donors are overwhelmingly Jewish. Jews do very, very well at Harvard. The idea that it's some kind of cesspool of anti-Semitism is laughable. But as we know, any criticism of Israel is now deemed anti-Semitic, and that's what's driving the Trump administration. And so now you take these huge numbers of foreign students who have spent years pursuing PhD programs. A lot of them are going to graduate and stay in the United States and become extremely productive members of American society. And even if they don't, even if they go back to their countries, they're obviously going to have a connection to the United States. And now you take all these people who have put years and years into their studies, and out of nowhere, they're instantly told your visa is revoked. And you can try and get into another school, we'll extend your visa then, but if you don't, Harvard doesn't have any more student visas. We're revoking them all, and we're banning Harvard from accepting any foreign students in the future. And this is basically on the verge of destroying Harvard, notwithstanding their $50 billion endowment. And as Lee said, this $50 billion endowment almost makes them like a hedge fund. So I don't have sympathy for Harvard, but it is true that denying them all federal money, destroying and forcing them to dismantle all research programs, and then disallowing any student, international students will absolutely cripple this institution that has for 500 years been the pinnacle of American greatness and a symbol of it and a crucial tool in soft power. And it's just yet another way that this government got into power and decided that one of its goals, if not its number one goal, was to punish anybody who was criticizing Israel. I think it's incredibly dangerous. What we've done is we basically turned the United States into a country where a requirement to enter, or to study, or to work is that you love Israel and worship Israel, or that you at least agree that you'll refrain from ever criticizing it. And we're just sacrificing so much of our national interest for this foreign country. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.